The sound hit harder than it should have. A sharp crack of paper against wood, echoing across the courtroom like something breaking. Everyone stopped, even the judge. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. He had been reading calmly just seconds before. Flipping through documents like this was just another routine case, another family dispute, another troubled teenager. Then his hand froze mid-page, and slowly, he looked up. Not confused, not angry, alert. Wait, who submitted this? You ever feel like a single moment can split your life into before and after? That was mine. I'm Lena Carter. I was 16 years old when my parents tried to prove, in a courtroom, that I had destroyed our family. Not just emotionally, financially, legally, completely. And the worst part? Everyone believed them. Let me take you back a few minutes before that moment. I was sitting at the defense table, trying to keep my hands still. They wouldn't stop shaking. So I just pressed them harder against my knees and hoped no one noticed. Across from me sat my parents. My mom, Diane Carter, 42. Perfect posture, perfect expression. Even her sadness looked rehearsed. And my dad, Mark Carter, 45. Quiet, still, nodding at the right moments like he'd memorized his role. Then it happened. My mom stood up, pointed directly at me, and said, "He ruined everything." Yeah, he. She didn't even correct herself. Didn't need to, because the point wasn't accuracy. It was impact. And it worked. People in the courtroom shifted, whispered, looked at me differently, like I wasn't just a kid anymore, like I was something else, something dangerous. What were they accusing me of? Oh, nothing small. They claimed I had accessed their financial accounts without permission, made reckless transactions, caused serious debt, and destabilized the household. Sounds insane, right? Here's the problem. On paper, it didn't. I said nothing. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I had already been warned. Let them talk first, my lawyer told me. That was Rachel Kim, 34, calm, focused, the kind of person who didn't waste words or reactions. While my parents spoke, she didn't interrupt, didn't object. She just watched, taking notes, waiting. And that made things worse, because from the outside, it looked like we had nothing. The judge kept reading through their evidence, page after page, transaction logs, printed statements, notes about my behavior. Everything neat, organized, convincing, too convincing. You ever hear a story that sounds perfect, but something feels off? That was this. Because here's the question no one was asking. How does a 16-year-old even pull something like this off? Complex financial movements, multiple accounts, consistent patterns. It didn't make sense. Unless you believed exactly what they wanted you to believe. I kept my eyes down, because if I looked at them, really looked, I knew I'd react. And that's what they wanted. A reaction, a mistake, something they could point to and say, "See, this is who she is." Then Rachel moved, just slightly. She reached into her folder and pulled out a file. No dramatic speech, no warning. She simply placed it on the table in front of the judge. That sound? That was this moment. The moment everything shifted. The moment the story they built started to crack. The judge flipped it open. At first, nothing changed. His eyes moved across the page like before. Calm, neutral, then slower. Then he stopped. And when he looked up this time, everything felt different, sharper. He scanned the room, then landed on us. "Wait, who submitted this?" And right then, I knew something they didn't. This wasn't their story anymore. But to understand why that file mattered, you have to go back to the moment I saw something I was never supposed to see. This didn't start in a courtroom. It started with a password. A simple one. That's all it took. One afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, My mom slid her laptop toward me like it was nothing. "Hey, Lena," she said casually. "Can you fix something in the bank account? It's not loading right." Normal, right? That's what I thought too. Because up until that moment, my life looked fine. Not perfect, not terrible, just controlled. My mom, Diane, liked things a certain way. Schedules, appearances, conversations. Everything had a structure, a tone, a script. If something went off script, she noticed. Immediately. My dad? He didn't challenge it. He just followed along, like background noise in a scene that didn't belong to him anymore. And me? I stayed in my lane. Good grades, no trouble, helped out when asked, especially with tech stuff. Passwords, emails, online forms, that was my thing. So when she gave me access to the account, it didn't feel like trust. It felt like responsibility. At first, everything looked normal. Balances, transactions, utility payments, the usual. But then I scrolled, and something felt off. You ever notice something small that doesn't make sense, but you can't explain why? That was the first transaction I saw. A transfer. Large. Way larger than anything I'd seen before. And it wasn't labeled clearly. No description, no familiar recipient. Just gone. I frowned, thinking maybe I clicked something wrong. So I refreshed the page. Same thing. Scrolled further, and there it was again. Another transfer. Different amount, same pattern. My stomach tightened, because this wasn't a glitch, it was a pattern. "Did you fix it?" my mom asked from across the room. Her tone was light, almost distracted, but something about it made me hesitate. "Yeah, I think so," I said. I didn't mention what I saw. Not yet, because I wasn't even sure what I was looking at. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I did something I probably shouldn't have. I logged back in. This time, I looked deeper. Transaction history, linked accounts, archived statements. And that's when it got worse. There were accounts I didn't recognize, names I'd never seen before, and transfers going both ways. Not just money leaving, money moving around. Like someone was trying to hide it. My chest felt tight, because this wasn't just bad budgeting. This was something else, something deliberate. The next morning, I tried to bring it up, casually. "Hey, Mom, I saw some weird transactions yesterday. Do you know what those are?" She froze, just for a second, but I saw it. Then she smiled, too quickly. "Oh, that? It's just account routing stuff. You wouldn't understand." Wouldn't understand? That didn't sit right. "I mean, they looked pretty big," I said carefully. That's when her expression changed. Not dramatic, subtle, but sharp. "Lena," she said, her voice suddenly colder, "you shouldn't be digging into things that aren't your responsibility." And just like that, the conversation was over. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. Because once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. So I kept looking, quietly, carefully, when they weren't around. Days passed, and every time I checked, I found more. More transfers, more accounts, more inconsistencies. Then one night, I saw something that made my heart drop. It was a transaction, but this time, the name attached to it wasn't unfamiliar. It was mine. Not just mentioned, not referenced, registered. An account, under my name, with activity I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was some kind of shared account. Maybe... No, because the details were clear, too clear. This wasn't something I had access to. This was something I was being used for. And in that moment, everything shifted. Because it wasn't just that something was wrong. It was that I was already part of it, without even knowing. And the worst part? I had no idea how deep it went. They didn't just involve me, they built the whole thing around me. That realization didn't hit all at once. It crept in, slow, heavy, like every new detail was another piece locking into place, and none of it pointed anywhere good. The next day, I tried to act normal, went to school, sat through classes, nodded when people talked to me. But my brain wouldn't stop replaying what I saw. An account, in my name, not shared, not supervised, active, used. So I made a decision. I was going to confront them. Not aggressively, not accusing, just ask. That night, I found my mom in the kitchen again. Same place, same setting, but everything felt different now. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why is there an account under my name?" Silence. Not long, but long enough. She turned slowly, and for a split second, her expression wasn't controlled. It wasn't calm. It was calculating. Then it snapped back into place. "Oh," she said lightly, "that's for savings. We set it up for you." That sounded reasonable. Almost. "Okay, but there are transactions on it," I said. "Like, recent ones." That's when everything changed. Her smile disappeared. Completely. "Why are you looking at that account?" The tone wasn't curious anymore. It was sharp, defensive. "You gave me access to the system," I said. "I just noticed you weren't supposed to go that far." The words landed hard, because she didn't deny it. She didn't explain it. She just redirected. And then my dad spoke, from behind me, quiet but firm. "Lena," he said, "you need to stop messing with things you don't understand." There it was again, that phrase, "you don't understand." But I was starting to, more than they realized. From that moment on, everything shifted. Passwords changed, access restricted. My laptop suddenly had issues. The Wi-Fi would cut out randomly, but only for me. It wasn't subtle. It was containment. And then came the conversations. "You've been acting strange lately. You're stressed. You're imagining things." At first, it almost worked. Because when two people, your parents, say the same thing over and over, you start to question yourself. But the evidence didn't disappear. I had already seen too much, so I adapted. I stopped using the main devices, used school computers, public networks, anything they couldn't monitor. And piece by piece, I started putting it together. There weren't just one or two accounts. There were multiple, all connected, all moving money in patterns that looked intentional. And the worst part? Several of them were tied to me, my name, my identity, my information. Not accidentally, systematically. Then I found the documents, hidden in a digital archive. Old files, applications, loan records, approved. My chest tightened as I scrolled, because these weren't small amounts, and they weren't recent. This had been happening for a while. And legally, on paper, it all pointed to one person. Me. That's when the fear really hit. Not confusion, not suspicion, fear. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was fraud. Serious fraud. And if it came out the wrong way, I wouldn't just be blamed, I'd be responsible. I needed help. Real help. So I did the only thing I could think of. I told someone outside the house, my school counselor. I didn't even know where to start. I just said, "I think something's wrong with my parents' finances, and my name is on it." That one sentence changed everything. Within days, I was referred to someone, a lawyer. That's when I met Rachel Kim. She didn't react the way I expected. No shock, no panic, just focus. She asked questions, precise ones, dates, access points, screenshots. And when I showed her what I had, she leaned back slightly, not surprised, concerned, but prepared. "Okay," she said calmly, "we're going to handle this carefully." Carefully. That word stuck with me. Because she didn't say fix, she didn't say report, she said handle. And that's when I realized something else. This wasn't just messy, it was strategic, which meant If we made the wrong move, everything could collapse on me. So we waited, gathered evidence, built a timeline, quietly. But we were too late, because before we could act, they did. One morning, Rachel called me. Her voice was steady but different. "They filed first," she said. "Filed what?" "A case," she clarified. "Against you." Everything went cold, because in that moment, it all clicked. They weren't just covering themselves, they were replacing themselves with me. By the time we walked into that courtroom, they had already told my story for me. And not the real one, the version they built, the version they rehearsed, the version everyone was ready to believe. Have you ever tried to defend yourself when people already decided who you are? That's what it felt like. The courtroom wasn't huge, but it felt suffocating. Every seat filled. Not just random people, familiar faces, neighbors, family friends, even a few relatives. All of them watching, all of them waiting. And when my parents walked in, they didn't look nervous. They looked prepared. My mom carried a folder, thick, organized, color-coded tabs. My dad stayed close beside her, quiet as always, but present, supportive. They looked like the victims. And me? I looked like the problem. The case started quickly. No drama, no build-up, just facts. Or at least, what sounded like facts. My mom spoke first. Her voice was steady, controlled, but emotional in all the right places. "She started changing," Diane said. "Spending more time online, being secretive, defensive." People nodded. Of course they did. It sounded familiar, believable. Then came the documents, printed transaction logs, highlighted sections, dates circled in red. "She had access to our accounts," Diane continued. "We trusted her, and she took advantage of that." There it was, clean, simple, a story anyone could follow. My dad backed it up, short statements, carefully timed. "I noticed discrepancies months ago," he said. "I didn't want to believe it at first." That line hit the room harder than anything else, because it added doubt, reluctance, which made it feel more real. You see how it works? They didn't just accuse me, they built a narrative people could feel. And for a while, it worked. Even the judge seemed neutral, listening, processing, no visible reaction. Then the evidence stack grew. More pages, more claims, more proof. But here's the thing. When you lie long enough, you start getting comfortable. And when people get comfortable, they make mistakes. Small ones at first, dates that didn't match perfectly, transactions at times I was at school, with records to prove it, amounts that didn't line up with any access I had. Nothing obvious, but enough. Rachel noticed everything. Of course she did. But she didn't interrupt, not once. That was the part that confused me the most. Why wasn't she stopping them? Why wasn't she pointing out the inconsistencies? Instead, she just kept writing, observing, waiting. At one point, I leaned slightly toward her and whispered, "Why aren't we saying anything?" She didn't look at me, didn't break focus. "Because," she said quietly, "they haven't realized what they've already given us." That sentence sat with me, heavy, unclear, but important. The hearing continued. My mom grew more confident, more detailed, too detailed. She started explaining things that weren't even necessary. Processes, steps, timelines, and every extra word added another thread, another detail that could be checked. And that's when Rachel moved. Finally, she stood up slowly, calm, controlled. "Your Honor," she said, "we'd like to submit additional documentation." No drama, no build-up, just a file, the same one, the one you heard at the beginning. She placed it on the table and gently pushed it forward. That sound? Sharp, final. The judge picked it up, flipped it open. At first, nothing changed. He read like before, steady, neutral. then slower. His eyes moved back up the page, then down again. Once, twice. The room started to shift. You could feel it. Not loudly, but subtly. Something was wrong. Then he stopped, completely. And when he looked up this time, it wasn't neutral anymore. It was focused, sharp, almost suspicious. His gaze moved across the courtroom, landed on my parents, then on Rachel, and finally back to the file. "Wait!" A pause. "Who submitted this?" And just like that, the version of me they created started falling apart. "Wait, who submitted this?" The question didn't just hang in the air, it shifted it. For the first time since the hearing started, my parents didn't look in control. Rachel stood up slowly, calm, precise. "The defense, Your Honor." The judge's eyes dropped back to the file, and this time, he wasn't just reading, he was analyzing. You could see it happening in real time, the slight narrowing of his eyes, the pause between pages, the way his finger traced a line, then went back to it. "This documentation," he said carefully, "is not formatted like standard personal records." Rachel nodded. "It isn't." A beat of silence. Then she delivered it, simple, direct. "These are certified audit logs from the bank itself, retrieved through subpoena." That word landed hard. Subpoena, meaning one thing. This wasn't something anyone could fake, not edit, not manipulate. It was the truth. The judge leaned back slightly, flipping to another section. "And these device IDs," he murmured. Rachel stepped forward just enough. "They're tied to the originating hardware used to authorize each transaction." Now the room was completely silent. No whispers, no shifting, just listening. "And according to these logs," Rachel continued, "the transactions in question were not initiated from any device associated with Lena Carter." A pause, then the final piece. "They were initiated from two primary sources." She didn't rush it, didn't dramatize it. She didn't have to. "The first, a home desktop registered to Diane Carter." My mom didn't move, didn't blink, but her hand tightened around the edge of the table. "And the second," Rachel said, turning a page, "a work-issued laptop assigned to Mark Carter." That's when my dad looked up, just slightly, and then back down, because there was nowhere else to look. The judge flipped again, faster now. "What about the accounts in the miner's name?" he asked. Rachel was ready. "They were opened using her identity credentials," she said. "However, the authorization logs show they were created from the same two devices." Same devices, same people. Everything pointed back to them. And then came the detail that broke it completely. "There is also a flagged transaction," Rachel added, "one that failed during processing." The judge paused. "Failed?" "Yes, Your Honor, but it still logged the originating device ID and user authentication." A single page turned. "And that record," Rachel said quietly, "directly identifies the user as Mark Carter." Silence. Not the kind from before. This one was different, heavier, final, because now there was no version of the story left to argue. The judge closed the file slowly, looked at my parents, not with curiosity, not with doubt, with clarity. "Given this evidence," he said, voice firm, "I see no basis for the claims made against Lena Carter." My chest tightened, then loosened all at once. For weeks, months, everything had been building to this moment. And just like that, it broke. "The case against the minor is dismissed effective immediately," the judge continued. Dismissed. That word echoed louder than anything else. But he wasn't done. "I am also ordering a formal investigation into Diane and Mark Carter for potential identity fraud, financial misconduct, and filing false claims before this court." And there it was. The shift. Complete. The same room that had been watching me like I was guilty was now looking at them. Whispers returned. but different this time, sharper. My mom tried to speak. "Your Honor, this is—" "Enough," the judge cut in, firm, final. My dad didn't say anything. He just sat there, still. Like the script had ended, and he didn't know what came next. And me? I didn't move either. Not at first, because I needed a second to process it. The pressure, the fear, the constant second-guessing. Gone. Not slowly, all at once. Rachel placed a hand lightly on the table beside me. Not congratulating, just grounding. "It's over," she said quietly. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Aftermath. What happened next? The courtroom moment didn't end everything. It started something new. Within weeks, the investigation moved forward. The audit logs we presented became the foundation. Authorities confirmed multiple accounts had been opened using my identity. Funds had been transferred in patterns designed to avoid detection. Documentation had been deliberately structured to shift blame onto me. My parents weren't misunderstood. They were intentional. Charges followed. Serious ones. Identity fraud, financial misconduct, filing false legal claims. The same system they tried to use against me turned on them. Socially, everything flipped. Relatives who once avoided eye contact started reaching out. Neighbors stopped whispering. Because now they knew. Not rumors, facts. And me? The court revisited my situation, not as a defendant, as a victim. My request for independence, the one that started all of this, was approved. No resistance, no hesitation, just recognition. Final resolution. A few weeks later, I was sitting in a small apartment. Quiet, no tension, no watching eyes, just space. On the table in front of me sat a single envelope, official, stamped. I opened it carefully. Inside was the confirmation I'd been waiting for. My financial record? Cleared. Completely. Every account tied to me, corrected. Every trace of what they did, removed. I read it twice, then folded it slowly. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I finally could. For so long, they controlled the story, what people saw, what people believed. But in the end, they made one mistake. They relied on something that could be checked, tracked, proven. And they never thought I'd be the one to find it. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the quiet room around me. No courtroom, no accusations, no script, just mine. They tried to write my story for me. I paused, looking down at the letter in my hands. But they forgot to check who was keeping the records.